All right, well, how about we go ahead and get started if that's all right with the governors and Secretary Fudge. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this discussion on HUD's allocation of disaster recovery and resilience funding. We will start with remarks from Secretary Marcia L. Fudge, followed by Puerto Rico Governor Pedro Pierluisi, Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards, Oregon Governor Kate Brown. And following remarks, we will open it up for a few questions this afternoon. Please try to keep all your questions on today's announcement, and please display your name so that we can call on you. Please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen to let us know that you have a question. And with that, we will now turn it over to Secretary Fudge.
Thank you very much, Megan, and I thank you all so much as well. Certainly, we know that climate change is a crisis that is impacting our communities across the United States, from severe storms and flooding to wildfires, drought, and extreme heat. Americans are feeling its effects every day. As the federal agency tasked with creating strong, sustainable, inclusive communities and quality, affordable homes, HUD is on the front lines of the nation's efforts to increase resilience to climate impacts. We play an essential role in helping communities recover and rebuild after disaster strikes. We convened this call to discuss HUD's allocation of $2 billion in Community Development Block Grant Disaster Recovery Funds. I'm pleased to announce these disaster recovery and mitigation funds to address the 2020 disasters. You have been waiting a long time, and I applaud our staff for getting these funds allocated to you within 30 days of congressional approval. I know some of you are also waiting for funds for 2021 disasters, including Ida, and we expect to have those announced before the end of December. I personally spent some time in Louisiana with the governor and saw firsthand the damage in Louisiana, and I know the need is great. CDBG-DR has a unique focus on long-term recovery and resilience efforts targeted to families with low and moderate incomes in the most impacted and distressed areas. With these allocations, HUD and the Biden-Harris administration
recording in progress
are providing communities resources to build back better from disasters and improve long-term equitable resilience to future impacts of climate change. This is a top priority of the administration and of this department, and a core piece of HUD's newly published Climate Action Plan, which is an agency-wide strategy to advance climate adaptation and resilience, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and deliver environmental justice. In line with the President's executive order, our plan underscores the department's commitment to allocating resources in a manner that addresses the historic failure of the federal government to invest sufficiently, justly, and equally in underserved communities, particularly communities of color. HUD will continue to work with communities to ensure that they can spend these resources as quickly as possible. Megan, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Secretary Fudge. We will now hear from Governor Pedro R. Pierluisi.
Yes, good afternoon all. My regards to Secretary Fudge. I have to say that I assumed office at about the same time the Biden-Harris administration started, and Secretary Fudge as well. And the change has been dramatic. For those of you who don't recall, about 4 years ago, we went through some terrible hurricanes. And by the time I assumed office, Puerto Rico had allocated about $10 billion in CDBG-DR funding to deal with the disasters, but only $1 billion roughly was obligated. And you might say, why? We were facing all kinds of bureaucratic restrictions that Secretary Fudge lifted shortly after assuming office. And what's the difference? Right now, we have allocated about $5 billion, obligated $5 billion out of the $10 billion we have available. I'm talking about climate change. One thing we're doing is for all the houses we're repairing or rebuilding under the R3 program, under CDBG-DR, we are installing solar panels and water tanks because we want our residents to be self-sufficient and be more resilient. So if God forbid, we face any kind of hurricane again, we're much better prepared. So that's the kind of thing that we can do together. In this case, the Biden-Harris administration with my administration in Puerto Rico. And on behalf of the people of Puerto Rico, I thank you.
Thank you, Governor. We will now hear from Governor John Bel Edwards.
Thank you. And thank you, Secretary Fudge. I appreciate you for hosting this call, for visiting Louisiana, for being a trusted partner. I also want to thank the Biden-Harris administration really for making climate change, resiliency, and equity integral parts of this conversation. You know, in the span of just over a year, Louisiana had 5 hurricanes make landfall here. And 2 of those were tied for the strongest ever to make landfall in Louisiana. Hurricane Laura last year, Hurricane Ida this year. And the first one was in Southwest Louisiana, the second was in Southeast Louisiana, and we certainly have a long road of recovery ahead of us. But we are absolutely focused on building back better, making the best use of the resources we have, and as the Secretary mentioned, making those investments just as soon as we possibly can so that we can get people's lives right side up again in Louisiana. Of the $2 billion the Secretary just mentioned, Louisiana's allocated nearly $600 million for the state's long-term recovery from Hurricanes Laura and Delta in 2020. We very much appreciate that assistance. It's a great start, and we're thankful. We do believe that we need additional funding, and we're going to continue to work with the administration, with Secretary Fudge, and with Congress in order to secure the remainder of what we need for a true recovery in Southwest Louisiana from the 2020 storms. And I believe we're all on the same page. I just came back from Washington on Tuesday night. I had many meetings with the administration, with leaders in Congress. And so I think that and I'm looking forward to continuing those conversations and making this relief possible. We've been working with the communities impacted by these storms for many months to develop a robust recovery plan that will make the best use of every dollar that we receive. And Madam Secretary, I can assure you that once HUD publishes the Federal Register notice establishing the rules for these grant dollars, you will very quickly be getting a state action plan that you can be proud of, that you can approve so that we can get started. So again, I thank you very much for this opportunity, for your partnership, and I look forward to any questions that I might get.
Thank you, Governor. And finally, we will hear from Governor Kate Brown.
Thank you so much. And thank you to Secretary Fudge and my colleagues, Governor Edwards and Governor Pierluisi, for being here today and truly lifting up the importance of equity in disaster recovery and resilience as we rise to meet the impacts of disasters caused by climate change. I became governor in Oregon in 2015, and every year since then, the extreme weather has been worse than the last. Put simply, climate change is truly a hammer hitting Oregon and many of the states directly in the head. Our Labor Day fires of 2020 were unlike anything we have seen in recent memory. Within a 48-hour period, high winds spurred intense fires that burned over 1 million acres across our state, from Southern Oregon to the doorstep of the Portland metropolitan area. And truly, communities disappeared overnight. Tens of thousands of Oregonians were evacuated. Thousands of people left homeless and economically vulnerable. The fires destroyed transportation, utility, and communications infrastructure, and devastated our ecosystems and watersheds. The inescapable truth of climate change is that our most vulnerable communities are the hardest hit by natural disasters. Because of racism and systemic inequities, Oregon's rural, low income, and communities of color who lost their homes in the 2020 Labor Day fires faced the greatest barriers to recovery. Of the over 4,000 homes that were destroyed, half were manufactured or mobile. Most of the communities upended were in rural parts of our state, communities that were already facing huge economic stress due to the pandemic, a lack of affordable housing, and other economic challenges. Like other states, our small businesses are truly the backbone of our economy, and many are still suffering from fire-related closures. We absolutely must build back better, and it must be more just and more equitable. And with the appropriation of $422 million for disaster recovery allocated to Oregon by HUD and the Biden-Harris administration, we plan to expand access to affordable, fire-resilient, and climate-adapted housing in the most impacted communities. We will work to replace homes for families who've been living displaced for over a year now. And these funds are absolutely critical, frankly, not just for wildfire recovery, but to ensure a longer-term equitable recovery that promotes resilience statewide. This investment is truly extraordinary, and I want to say thank you to Secretary Fudge and the team at HUD for your work to expedite this grant. Thank you for giving us the flexibility to use these funds to help all of our families, regardless of their immigration or documentation status. These families are woven into the fabric of our communities, and we will work quickly to ensure that every Oregonian displaced is provided with safe shelter and more permanent housing. I know that the road to recovery remains long, but today is truly a cause for celebration. Again, thank you, Secretary Fudge. We are so grateful for your partnership and, of course, the partnership with the Biden-Harris administration as we help our Oregon families recover from some of the darkest and most devastating days of their lives. We are absolutely excited to reimagine and rebuild a more just and equitable future for all of our families. So thank you, and I look forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Governor. We will now open the floor for a few questions. I also want to take a moment to introduce, for any technical or program-related questions, Kevin Bush, our Deputy Assistant Secretary for Grant Programs at HUD. To ask a question, just as a reminder, please use the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen, and please display your full name so that we can call on you. If we are not able to get to your question or you have any follow-up questions after this call, please feel free to email us at hudpressoffice@hud.gov. And with that, we will open for any questions.
Listen. Oh, I see some hands. I thought we had gotten away clean. Go ahead.
Okay, so, all righty. So we will go to Ariel Salk. Ariel, if you'd like to unmute.
Hi, thank you so much. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you for holding this today. My name is Ariel Salk. I'm with WVLA. I've got two questions, if you don't mind me just firing them off. Might be best for Governor John Bel Edwards. Who will be managing the money here in Louisiana? And I know we're waiting for specific regulations on where this money can or cannot go, but do you have a rough idea of where this money will be allocated to specifically?
Well, thank you, Ariel, for the question. The Office of Community Development here, that's within the Division of Administration, will administer the CDBG disaster recovery funds that we're talking about. So, and we don't have the Federal Register notice, but what we know is that this allocation is for 2020 storms. The overwhelming share of the damage is in Southwest Louisiana. And so that's where the funding will go. Virtually all of it to housing, and we need more funding, as I mentioned earlier. But within the funding, there's a certain part of it that will be required to be spent on mitigation. Right now, that's close to $90 million on mitigation, which helps us to prepare for the next event, because we know it's coming, and this is part of building back better as well. So we know geographically where it's going to be spent. We know it's going to be spent on housing and in Southwest Louisiana. But more than that, I think we're going to have to wait until the Federal Register notice comes out.
Thank you, Ariel, and thank you, Governor. We will now go to Melinda, who I believe is from AP Louisiana. Melinda, if you want to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Melinda, we can hear you.
Okay, great. On the subject of the Federal Register and the announcement, I guess that was my question for the HUD Secretary, is when do you expect the rules to be promulgated to explain to states how they have to, what parameters they have to use to spend their money? What's the timeline for that?
Kevin, why don't you take that one for us?
Happy to, Madam Secretary. So to clarify, there is no permanent reliable framework for the CDBG-DR program. It's not a permanently authorized program, so we do not have the ability to promulgate permanent regulations. What we do every time we receive a supplemental appropriation, in this case on October 1st of this year, we then have to write a set of program requirements to meet that specific appropriation and publish it in the Federal Register. And that is currently in the works and imminent.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Melinda. I see we have another question from Jose Delgado. Jose, would you like to unmute? Jose?
Yes, hello. Can you listen? Hello?
We hear you.
Okay. Can you provide me a breakdown of the fund for Puerto Rico and specifically for what disaster? I imagine is the earthquake if it's 2020. And also in the past, there have been complaints about Puerto Rico capacity to manage billions of dollars. I would like the Secretary to tell if she considered that the rebuilding process is going at the right pace.
I can just off the top just give you the total allocation for Puerto Rico out of these 2020 funds, which is $184 million. And I'm very comfortable with Governor Pierluisi and the team that is in place. Our team and the team in Puerto Rico on the ground are working very well together. And so I'm very comfortable.
Thank you.
Governor, do you want to respond?
Yes, quickly, Jose. We got $150 million for the from the CDBG-DR program due to the earthquakes we suffered in early 2020. So far, we have allocated $36 million to 5 municipalities. The action plan has been submitted and approved by HUD. We haven't gotten the grant agreement yet, but we will be getting it shortly and executing it. So what we have decided to do in the case of this particular CDBG-DR funds is to work with the municipalities, allow the municipalities to be the ones actually performing the public works and spending the federal funds. We will be overseeing, but that's what we're doing in Puerto Rico, Jose.
Thank you, Jose, and thank you, Governor. We will now go to John. I believe he's with the American Press.
Unmute, John.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This question's for Governor Edwards. I know you were in Lake Charles last week, and you spoke about going to Washington, D.C. to try to secure more federal funding for Southwest Louisiana. Just wanted to see if you could maybe expand upon that trip and just your overall thoughts about whether this region can secure additional federal dollars for hurricane recovery over the long term.
Well, John, I do think that is going to happen. I'm optimistic. And there's really a couple of ways it could happen. One is another appropriation that comes through Congress. And I spent most of my time in Washington on Monday and Tuesday meeting with our congressional delegation, House and Senate, but Republican and Democrat leaders in the Senate and in the House. making the case and giving them also an idea of the damages, how catastrophic and widespread they were for Hurricane Ida. And that's 2021, and that's not really part of this discussion. So if it requires another appropriation to allow us to have the recovery that we need related, especially to housing and the unmet need out there for low to moderate income homeowners and renters, then I expect that appropriation will happen, because I gauged a lot of support from the administration and from Congress. I do believe it is possible, and I can't speak for the secretary, but there's $3 billion remaining of the appropriation that was made, and it's possible, and that some part of that could be added to the $595 million that we're talking about today. So one way or another, I expect success. I can't give you the exact time frame on that, but I do believe that we're going to be successful.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Governor. I think we're coming up on time here. Are there any questions for Governor Brown before we close out? I just want to make sure. Okay. Well, Madam Secretary, would you like to leave us with any final words?
I just want to thank, I understand we have about 60 people on this call. We appreciate very much your joining us. I certainly am extremely proud of the work that your governors are doing and that your communities are doing to try to rebuild from these devastating climate occurrences. We are going to continue to work to be as inclusive as we can and make sure that we get the input from the governors and mayors, et cetera, but to make people understand that we are doing all we can as quick as we can to start to address this problem. As soon as we get resources from Congress, we try to get them to you as rapidly as we can. So if you have questions after this, I'm sure that Megan will be available to you. And I thank you, governors, and I thank all of you for being on the call today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. And I know we weren't able to get to all the questions, so we will, please follow up with us by email and we will do the same.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. It's an honor and a delight, and we will trust that we will put these monies to good use and focused on our historically underserved communities. So thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary.